Look, it is great to hear Brian speak, and it's been good to get to know him a bit better the last few weeks. As he said, his helicopter view across the whole of recovery is just critical. My view, obviously, is to the human and social recovery. But as Brian said, if our economy doesn't kick back in, if our infrastructure is not in place, and that impacts on the economic viability of individuals and families, then that creates its own stresses, and we end up with more counselling services through UCC. And I see Anne McQuarrie here. G'day Anne, how you going? Anne's done a lot of work with us in Bundaberg floods a few years back as well. Look, my focus is really on vulnerable Queenslanders, particularly people whose very existence is on the margins. Might be mental health illness, might be poverty, might be previous child protection concerns, domestic and family violence, a whole range of things that put a lot of our community coping okay, but on the margins. Just as some small businesses, particularly Sue, have been dramatically affected by this event and have been operating on the margin of viability for some time. Lots of families and individuals are also margin in that respect. The impacts of a disaster like this, and the secondary impacts, as we know, with the long-term power outages, has been enough to push a lot of those individuals and families sort of across the line to now have a whole range of dysfunction happening in their lives that even they didn't realise was occurring. And it's becoming more visible as our staff and some of our partners like Uniting Care Community and Red Cross and others reach out to those people. We're really finding some significant levels of distress in amongst those vulnerable Queenslanders. And as we know, that vulnerability doesn't always just come by age or economic status, but by race and gender, and even some of the sheer planes in community where the community fabric can pull part in these events is driven by even neighbourhood connectivity or lack of. Inclusion in a whole range of community events and participation in social life. So we're finding also that in lots of areas, particularly in some of the small rural communities that we're visiting, there is often a lot of work to be done to re-knit that community fabric, reconnect people into their social networks, re-establish the frameworks within which their small communities operate that have been fragmented or sheared by some of these events. I like what Brendan said about build things back better. I think that's part of our role in relation to the work we do in community recovery and the human and social, that we build back better into the future, that we help people not just survive and cope with the trauma, but actually grow from some of those experiences. Because I think what we'll find is that, and what we find from previous events, is that there's a new normal. People say, oh, things will get back to normal shortly. Well, actually, it's a new normal. Things aren't exactly the same for lots of people. Their participation in work and economy is now different. The way they feel about themselves, the way they connect to their neighbours is different. The way they engage in and participate in community life is different. So when people say, it won't be long, we'll be back to normal, I always say, well, it'll be a new normal. So I think we keep that in mind as we move forward as well. And hopefully that's building back better, that new normal than we had before. Look, I probably don't want to bore you much longer, but suffice to say that the work that my agency does through the state is very much about enabling that community-led recovery. Our experience from probably Larry, back seemed like a long time ago now, I think it was about 2006, the subsequent flooding events we've had here in central Queensland, the cyclones that have come through up north, Yasi particularly, lots of experiences we've gained, and it's absolutely crystal clear that community-led recovery, local recovery, is so critical to re-knitting that community fabric. Local governments play a fantastic role in that. We as a state authority try and enable and support that and encourage that to happen. Our partners in long-term recovery work with us around that and are really connected to those individuals and families. But that's the important work, I think. Again, it goes unsung to some degree, but it is the real important stuff. Because again, without people coping, recovering, you know, coming together in that new normal, then it doesn't matter how much infrastructure we rebuild, it doesn't matter how many dollars we pour in. That's really what's going to take us here in Rocky and in Poon and in, you know, communities like Byfield and even down through some of those smaller communities through the back of Gladstone where the cyclone went. Just those people reconnecting and being stronger and better for the future. So thanks for that, thanks for your time, thanks to Hilary and the University, much appreciated, and happy to answer any questions that come along. The other thing I was just going to say, for those that know me, and a lot of people in the room do, look, you will know that my dumb questions are pretend.
Pretending they pretend.